Hey guys, tonight we're diving into why you wouldn't last a day in ancient Rome. That's right, we're time traveling to a world of togas, triumphs, and truly atrocious hygiene. Welcome to ancient Rome, where the streets flowed with ambition, and also raw sewage. Forget everything Hollywood fed you about marble columns and noble gladiators. The real Rome? Think lead poisoning, public toilets with shared sponges, and a life expectancy that wouldn't get you past modern college. You probably wouldn't survive a full afternoon without catching something fatal or offending a senator. So, before we toss you to the lions, metaphorically, for now, hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you like your history served with a side of existential dread. And drop your time and location in the comments. It's fun seeing who's tuning into this historical slumber party, preferably from the safety of a plague-free century. Now, dim the lights, perhaps light a candle for ambience, though after hearing about Roman lighting methods, you might reconsider, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Pull your blanket close, you'll need the comfort where we're going. Congratulations, you've just awakened in the year 79 CE. The good news? You're alive. The bad news? So are the lice, the bed bugs, and whatever that smell is that's currently assaulting your nostrils. Your bed isn't a bed at all, but a straw-stuffed mattress resting on rope webbing that sags in the middle like a hammock designed by someone who fundamentally misunderstood the concept of comfort. There's no memory foam, no Egyptian cotton, not even a proper pillow, just a lumpy sack filled with wool that smells faintly of sheep and strongly of the last 3 people who rested their heads upon it. You blink awake as the sound of street vendors begins to rise outside your window. If you can call that small opening covered with wooden shutters a window. It's Rome's version of an alarm clock, a cacophony of merchants hawking everything from fresh fish to questionable meat pies, all competing to see who can shatter the morning calm most effectively. Your home, if you're lucky enough to be middle class, is an apartment in an insula. A rickety tenement building stacked several stories high, constructed with all the care and precision of a child's first attempt at building blocks. The walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbours' marital disputes, digestive distress, and every creak of their equally uncomfortable bed. If you're less fortunate, you might be in a ground-floor apartment where the street noise is your constant companion, along with the occasional flood when the Tiber decides it's tired of staying within its banks. The smell. Oh, the smell. It's a complex bouquet that would make a modern perfumer weep, though not from appreciation. Notes of human waste mingle with rotting food, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present aroma of garum, that beloved fermented fish sauce that Romans splash on everything, as if it's going out of style. Spoiler alert, eventually it will. Scented candles haven't been invented, and even if they had, they'd surrender in defeat to this olfactory battlefield. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it because your joints ache from sleeping on what amounts to a torture device disguised as bedding. You're 30 years old, which in Roman terms means you've already outlived many of your contemporaries. Your back pops like a series of tiny catapults, and your knees sound like someone crushing walnuts underfoot. Getting out of bed is less a choice and more a negotiation between your will to live and your body's protest against existing. The floor beneath your feet is cold stone or packed earth, depending on your social status. Either way, it's not the plush carpet your 21st century toes are accustomed to. And privacy, what's that? Your entire family, spouse, children, perhaps an elderly parent or two, are all stirring around you. If you're wealthy, you might have slaves sleeping nearby, ready to assist with your morning routine. If not, well, at least you don't have to worry about tipping the help. Welcome to morning in ancient Rome. where you're never truly alone because the walls are thin, the streets are loud, and personal space is a concept as foreign as refrigeration. And this is just how your day begins. It only gets worse from here. Much, much worse. So you've managed to peel yourself from your Roman bed. Congratulations. Now nature calls, and it's not being polite about it. Here's where you'll start missing modern plumbing with an intensity that rivals the sun over the Colosseum at midday. In ancient Rome, the bathroom situation is what we might generously call communal, and less generously call a nightmare of public humiliation. If you're wealthy, you might have a chamber pot in your room, a ceramic vessel that will sit there, contents and all, until a slave can dispose of it. If you're of more modest means, you'll need to make your way to the public latrines. Picture this: a room with stone benches lining the walls, holes cut at regular intervals, and not a divider in sight. That's right. You'll be conducting your most private business shoulder to shoulder with strangers, merchants, sailors, and possibly that neighbour whose snoring kept you awake last night. The Romans, you see, viewed defecation as a social activity. People chat, discuss politics, and make business deals while relieving themselves. It's networking, Roman style. Beneath these benches runs a channel of water, if you're lucky, and the aqueducts are functioning properly. If not, well, use your imagination. And toilet paper? Never heard of it. Instead, there's a communal sponge on a stick, sitting in a bucket of vinegar or salt water. Yes, you read that correctly. A communal sponge, used by everyone, all day long. Suddenly that chamber pot doesn't sound so bad, does it? If you're in a particularly fancy latrine, there might be mosaics on the floor or frescoes on the walls, because nothing says high-class elimination like artwork depicting the gods watching you while you go. Some latrines even have running water beneath the seats, a luxury that would make your average Roman feel like royalty, even while sitting on what amounts to a stone toilet seat that's never known the touch of disinfectant. And here's a fun fact that will haunt your nightmares. These public latrines were sometimes built over the city's sewers, which occasionally backed up. Worse yet, the methane buildup in these sewers could cause explosions. That's right. In ancient Rome, your toilet might literally blow up beneath you. Talk about a bad day. If you're out and about when nature calls and there's no latrine nearby, the solution is simple. Find an alley. Public urination and defecation were common enough that laws were eventually passed to curb the practice, though enforcement was spotty at best. The streets of Rome were many things, but clean was rarely one of them. So whether you're a patrician or a plebeian, a senator or a slave, the call of nature in ancient Rome is answered with discomfort, public exposure, and hygiene practices that would make a modern doctor faint. And you still haven't washed your hands, because soap as we know it doesn't exist yet. But don't worry, we'll get to personal hygiene soon enough. For now, try not to think about that communal sponge as you prepare for breakfast, Roman style. You've survived the toilet experience, and now your stomach is growling like an angry lion in the Colosseum. Time for breakfast. But if you're expecting pancakes with syrup or a nice bowl of cereal, you're about to be sorely disappointed. Breakfast in ancient Rome is a humble affair that would make modern nutritionists weep into their kale smoothies. The typical Roman breakfast, or irontaculum as they call it, consists of leftover bread from yesterday. Not soft, fluffy bread with a golden crust, mind you. We're talking about dense, sometimes stale bread that could double as a weapon in a pinch. This might be dipped in wine, yes, wine for breakfast, because the Romans understood that starting your day with alcohol was sometimes the only way to face the reality of ancient life. If you're particularly fortunate, you might have some olives, a bit of cheese that's been sitting out all night, or perhaps a few dried fruits that look suspiciously like they were dried not by design, but by neglect. fresh fruit. Only if it's in season and you live near an orchard, otherwise forget it. There's no coffee to jolt you awake, no tea to soothe your nerves. Instead, you might have some posca, a mixture of vinegar, water and herbs that tastes exactly as appealing as it sounds. It's acidic enough to make your face pucker like you've just bitten into a lemon, but at least it's safer than the water from the public fountain, which might contain anything from lead, thanks to those fancy Roman pipes, to the runoff from the local tannery. The wealthy Romans might enjoy eggs, honey, or even some cold meat from last night's dinner. But for the average citizen, breakfast is merely a pit stop on the way to more important matters, not the elaborate ritual we've turned it into. No one is posting their Roman breakfast on social media, which is probably for the best, as stale bread soaked in watered-down wine wouldn't get many likes anyway. Children aren't eating sugary cereals or demanding chocolate chip pancakes. They're gnawing on the same hard bread as everyone else, perhaps with a smear of olive oil if they're lucky. The concept of kid food doesn't exist. In Rome, you eat what's available and you're grateful for it because famine is always just one bad harvest away. Want some butter with that bread? Good luck. The Romans considered butter a barbaric food, used primarily by the Gauls and other uncivilized peoples. Olive oil is the fat of choice here, used for everything from cooking to skincare to lamp fuel. It's the WD-40 of the ancient world. If something needs lubricating, reach for the olive oil. So you choke down your stale bread, perhaps dipped in some garum, that fermented fish sauce we mentioned earlier. If you're feeling adventurous, wash it all down with wine diluted with water that you hope won't give you dysentery and prepare to face the day. Your stomach isn't satisfied, but it's quieter now, which in ancient Rome counts as a win. And now that you've had your less than satisfying breakfast, it's time to get dressed. But don't expect to spend time choosing the perfect outfit. Your wardrobe options are about as varied as the facial expressions of a Roman statue. For men, the basic garment is the tunic, a simple T-shaped piece of cloth sewn together at the sides and shoulders, reaching to about the knees. It's the ancient equivalent of a long t-shirt, except made from wool or linen that feels like you're wearing a burlap sack. If you're a working-class Roman, this might be your entire outfit, perhaps with a belt to hitch it up for mobility. The fabric is undyed for the poor, off-white at best, and probably stained with the evidence of meals past. If you're a citizen of some standing, you might don the famous toga over your tunic. But let me tell you, the toga is not the simple bedsheet-like wrap that Halloween costumes would have you believe. It's an enormous semicircle of wool, about 18 feet long and 6 feet wide. Putting it on requires either assistance or the patience of a saint as you wrap and drape and adjust, trying to achieve those elegant folds you've seen in statues. It's hot, heavy, restrictive, and absolutely impractical for anything resembling actual work. But it's a status symbol, so you wear it anyway, sweating profusely and praying you don't trip over the excess fabric and faceplant in front of the Senate. Women have the stola, a long flowing dress worn over a tunic, often belted twice, once under the breasts and once at the waist, to create that fashionable ancient silhouette. It's more comfortable than the toga, but not by much, especially in Rome's sweltering summer heat. Wealthy women might have silk or fine linen, but most make do with wool that itches like 1,000 tiny needles against the skin. Underwear. It exists, but not as we know it. Men might wear a subligaculum, essentially a loincloth or shorts. Women have a band of cloth called the strophium that wraps around the chest, providing about as much support as a gentle suggestion. There are no elastic waistbands, no breathable fabrics, and certainly no moisture-wicking technology. Just layer upon layer of natural fibres that absorb sweat and hold onto odours like they're precious memories. Shoes, if you can afford them, are simple leather sandals that offer all the arch support of a piece of paper. The streets of Rome are filthy, remember, so your feet will be caked with dust, mud, and things you'd rather not identify by the end of the day. The wealthy might have more elaborate footwear, perhaps dyed in bright colours or decorated with metalwork, but they're still essentially glorified flip-flops, and don't even think about socks. They exist in some parts of the empire, particularly the colder regions, but they're not the soft cotton foot huggers you're used to. They're more like cloth bags for your feet, with all the comfort that implies. Once dressed, you might want to check your appearance, but there are no full-length mirrors here. The best you can hope for is a small, polished metal disc that gives you a warped, dim reflection of your face. Good enough to check if there's food in your teeth, there probably is, but not much else. So there you stand, itchy, slightly sweaty already, and dressed in clothing that would be rejected by even the most forgiving modern thrift store. But in ancient Rome, you're ready to face the day, or at least as ready as you'll ever be. Now it's time to step outside and brave the streets of the Eternal City, where a whole new set of challenges awaits. You've stepped outside your dwelling and into the streets of Rome, and immediately you're assaulted by a sensory experience that would overwhelm even the most seasoned traveller. The streets of the Eternal City are nothing like the pristine marble wonderland depicted in Hollywood epics. They're narrow, winding, and absolutely teeming with humanity in all its unwashed glory. The roads themselves are a hazard course designed by someone with a twisted sense of humour. In the better parts of town, you might find streets paved with large, uneven stones that turn into slippery death traps when it rains. In poorer areas, it's packed dirt that transforms into mud at the slightest hint of moisture. There are no sidewalks as you know them, just slightly raised stones at the edge of some roads that serve as a half-hearted attempt to separate pedestrians from the constant parade of carts, animals, and litters carrying the wealthy who wouldn't dream of dirtying their sandals on the common ground. The noise is deafening. Street vendors shout the virtues of their wares, from fresh fish to dubious medicines guaranteed to cure everything from baldness to broken hearts. Craftsmen hammer away at their trades, creating a metallic symphony that never quite resolves into harmony. Animals add their voices to the cacophony, donkeys braying, dogs barking, chickens clucking, and the occasional escaped pig squealing as it's chased by its frustrated owner. And the people, oh, the people. Rome is a metropolis of perhaps 1 million souls, all seemingly determined to be exactly where you're trying to walk. There are no traffic rules, no orderly queues, just a chaotic flow of humanity pushing, shoving, and occasionally cursing in Latin when someone steps on a toga hem or jostles an amphora of wine. The smell hits you in waves. There's the ever-present aroma of human waste. Despite Rome's famous sewers, not all neighbourhoods are connected to them, and even in those that are, not everyone bothers to use them properly. Food odours waft from thermopolia, ancient fast food joints where clay pots are embedded in stone counters, keeping stews and soups warm for hungry passers-by. Some smells are pleasant: fresh bread, roasting meats, fragrant oils, but they're in constant competition with the less savoury notes of tanneries, fullers cleaning clothes with stale urine, yes, really, and the general miasma of too many bodies in too little space. Watch your step. That's not a puddle of rainwater you're about to walk through. In Rome, chamber pots are often emptied directly into the streets, with the half-hearted courtesy of a warning shout if you're lucky. The wealthy are carried above this filth in litters borne by slaves, looking down, literally and figuratively, on the masses navigating the squalor below. Speaking of looking up, that might be dangerous too. Multi-story apartment buildings line many streets, and without strict building codes or regular maintenance, bits of facade have been known to crumble onto unfortunate pedestrians below. Fire is a constant threat in these densely packed wooden structures, and when one starts, it can consume entire neighborhoods before the bucket brigades can even organize their response. Street crime is rampant, especially after dark. There's no police force as you know it, just the occasional patrol of watchmen who are often as corrupt as the criminals they're supposedly controlling. Pickpockets work the crowds, particularly around popular attractions like the Colosseum or the Forum. More violent robbers might wait in darker alleys, ready to relieve you of your purse or your life, whichever is easier to take. If you're hoping to escape the chaos by ducking into a shop, think again. Roman retail happens right on the street, with goods displayed on tables or shelves extending from small storefronts. Haggling is expected, fixed prices are rare, and the concept of a return policy would be met with uproarious laughter. Need to cross town? Hope you're wearing comfortable sandals because walking is your primary option. The wealthy might have horses or be carried in litters, but for the average Roman, it's foot power or nothing. And remember, Rome is built on 7 hills, so you're not just walking, you're hiking, often uphill, on uneven surfaces, through crowds, in the heat, wearing what amounts to a woolen dress or an oversized bedsheet if you're sporting that toga. So there you are, standing in the midst of this glorious chaos, already sweating through your tunic, dodging waste being thrown from windows above, trying not to twist an ankle on the uneven paving stones, all while being jostled by the crowd and assaulted by smells that would make a modern sewage worker reach for a respirator. And your workday hasn't even begun yet. Welcome to the streets of ancient Rome, beautiful, terrible, and utterly exhausting before you've even reached the end of your block. Now that you've navigated the treacherous streets of Rome, it's time to talk about work. Because in ancient Rome, your job isn't just a way to pay the bills, it's a social identifier, often inherited from your father, that will follow you to your grave. Literally, as many tombstones proudly declare the deceased's profession alongside their name. If you're a patrician, one of Rome's elite upper class, you might not have what we'd call a job at all. Your work consists of politics, managing vast estates, and engaging in the complex web of patronage that keeps Roman society functioning. Each morning, your clients, free citizens of lower status who have pledged themselves to your service in exchange for protection and favours, will arrive at your door for the salutatio, a daily greeting ritual where they pay respects and you dispense advice, money, or promises. It's networking, Roman style, and it's exhausting. You'll spend hours listening to requests, mediating disputes, and maintaining the delicate balance of social obligations that define your existence. For the vast majority who aren't born into privilege, work is a sunrise to sunset affair that would make modern labour laws spontaneously combust in protest. If you're a plebeian, a common citizen, you might be a craftsman, merchant, or shopkeeper. Bakers start work in the darkest hours of the night, preparing dough for the morning rush. Blacksmiths sweat over forge fires hot enough to make the summer heat seem pleasant by comparison. Tanners work with urine and animal brains to cure leather, going home each night reeking so powerfully that they often live in designated neighbourhoods downwind from everyone else. Skilled trades are organised into collegia, something like guilds or unions, though their primary purpose is religious and social rather than collective bargaining. Your father was a potter. Congratulations, you're a potter now. The concept of following your dreams or finding your passion would be met with the same bewildered stare as if you'd suggested flying to the moon for dinner. If you're really unlucky, you might be among the urban poor who survive on day labour, carrying loads at the docks, helping with construction, or doing whatever back-breaking work is available that day. You'll gather at dawn in designated spots around the city, hoping to be chosen for work that pays enough for your next meal. No work today, no food tonight. It's that simple. And then there are the slaves. Comprising perhaps 30 to 40% of Rome's population, slaves do everything from the most degrading manual labour to highly skilled professional work. Some household slaves live better than free poor citizens, while others in the mines or quarries face conditions so brutal that death is often a welcome release. A talented slave physician, accountant, or teacher might eventually save enough to buy freedom, but for many, servitude is a life sentence. Women work too, though their options are more limited. They run households, manage small businesses, work as midwives or priestesses, and in poorer families, contribute to whatever trade keeps food on the table. The ideal of the leisured Roman matron applies only to the very wealthy. Most women work from dawn until they collapse into bed, managing both household duties and contributing to the family income. The concept of retirement doesn't really exist. You work until you physically can't anymore, then hope your children will support you. No 401k, no social security. No golden years spent travelling and taking up watercolour painting. Your twilight years are spent doing whatever tasks your ageing body can still manage, perhaps watching grandchildren or teaching your trade to the next generation. The workday itself is punishingly long. Romans rise with the sun and work until dusk, with perhaps a break during the hottest part of the day. Though this siesta-like pause is more common in summer and in the southern parts of the empire. There's no weekend as you know it. Markets are busiest on the Nundinae, a day that occurs every 8th day in the Roman calendar. But this isn't exactly a day off for most workers, just a different kind of busy. There are numerous religious festivals throughout the year that provide some respite, but even these often involve specific work preparing for celebrations. The concept of work-life balance would be as foreign to a Roman as electric lighting or antibiotics. Payment varies wildly depending on your profession and status. Some are paid in coin, others in goods or services. Many transactions involve complex webs of favours and obligations rather than straightforward payment. There's no minimum wage, no overtime, no paid sick leave. If you don't work, you don't eat. It's that brutally simple. So whether you're a senator debating policy in a marble-columned building, a blacksmith hammering out tools in the sweltering heat, or a slave cleaning the latrine of a wealthy home, work in ancient Rome is less a career and more a sentence, one that begins in childhood and ends only when your body finally surrenders to the accumulated toll of years of labour. And speaking of your body giving out, let's talk about what happens when you get sick in a world where germ theory is still nearly 2 millennia away. Feeling a bit under the weather in ancient Rome? Perhaps that breakfast of stale bread and watered-down wine didn't agree with you? Or maybe you've caught something from one of the countless people who coughed directly into your face while jostling you in the forum. Whatever the cause, getting sick in ancient Rome is an experience that makes the actual illness seem like the least of your problems. Let's start with diagnosis. There are no blood tests, no x-rays, no stethoscopes. Instead, a physician, if you can afford one, will examine your face, feel your pulse, perhaps inspect your bodily fluids with a disturbing level of interest, and then pronounce your condition based on the balance of your 4 humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. This theory, developed by the Greeks and embraced by Roman medicine, suggests that all illness stems from an imbalance in these bodily fluids. The diagnosis is less you have pneumonia, and more you have an excess of phlegm caused by too much cold and dampness in your system. The treatment? Restore balance, of course. And how do you do that? Often by removing the humour that's in excess. Got a fever? That's too much blood, so naturally you need bloodletting. A physician will use a sharp knife to open a vein, or perhaps apply leeches to suck out the bad blood. They'll drain you until you feel faint, which is apparently the body's way of saying, "Thank you for this medically dubious procedure." Feeling nauseous? Clearly an excess of bile. The solution is to vomit, a lot. Emetics, like white hellebore, will be administered to induce vomiting so violent it makes modern food poisoning look like a gentle digestive disagreement. If that doesn't work, there's always the purging option from the other end. Powerful laxatives will ensure that whatever is ailing you exits your body with spectacular urgency, along with most of your dignity and any remaining strength. Medications exist, but they're a terrifying grab bag of the occasionally effective, the completely useless, and the actively harmful. Willow bark tea might help your headache. It contains salicylic acid, the precursor to aspirin, but you're just as likely to be prescribed a concoction of ground pigeon droppings, the urine of a virgin boy, or a paste made from crushed beetles. Many remedies involve ingredients so rare or disgusting that you have to wonder if the cure is deliberately worse than the disease. Surgery is available for certain conditions, performed without anesthesia beyond perhaps a cup of strong wine or a wooden stick to bite down on. Surgical tools are basic: bronze or iron scalpels, forceps, probes, and sterilization consists of a quick wipe with vinegar if you're lucky. Infection is so common after surgery that it's considered part of the healing process rather than a complication. For the wealthy, there are private physicians, often Greek slaves or freedmen who've studied medicine. For everyone else, there are folk healers, midwives with herbal knowledge, or the temple of Asclepius, where the sick sleep in hopes of receiving healing dreams from the god of medicine. Many Romans wear amulets or recite charms alongside taking their medicines, hedging their bets between science and superstition. The concept of contagion is vaguely understood, but not in any scientific way. Plagues are attributed to miasma, bad air, or divine punishment, not microscopic organisms. Public health measures exist, like Rome's impressive sewers and aqueducts, but they're engineering achievements rather than medical ones. No one is washing their hands between patients or boiling surgical instruments. Chronic conditions, you'll just have to live with them. Arthritis, respiratory problems, digestive disorders, these are considered normal parts of aging or the result of an inherently imbalanced constitution. Pain management consists largely of wine, opium if you're lucky or wealthy enough to get it, and the Stoic philosophy that suffering is simply part of existence. Mental illness receives similarly enlightened treatment. Depression might be diagnosed as an excess of black bile, while more severe conditions could be attributed to demonic possession or divine punishment. Treatment ranges from gentle music therapy and soothing baths, not bad, to drilling holes in the skull to release evil spirits, very bad. Childbirth deserves special mention as perhaps the most dangerous medical event in a woman's life. Midwives assist with delivery using a birthing chair and various herbal preparations to ease labour. But complications that would be routine in a modern hospital are often fatal. Caesarean sections exist, but are typically performed only when the mother has died in an attempt to save the child. The mortality rate for all ages is staggering by modern standards. Infant mortality might reach 30% or higher. Reaching age 50 is an achievement worth celebrating. A simple cut could lead to infection and death. A broken bone might never heal properly, leaving you permanently disabled. Appendicitis, kidney stones, or a severe tooth abscess could be your end. So as you lie there, sweating through your tunic with whatever ancient malady has befallen you, remember that in Rome, getting better often depends more on your natural resilience and sheer luck than on any medical intervention. The good news? If you survive, Romans will attribute it to your strong constitution or the favour of the gods. The bad news? If you don't, well, at least the funeral practices are interesting. But we'll get to those later. For now, let's assume you've survived your brush with Roman healthcare and are ready to experience what passes for entertainment in the ancient world. You've survived illness in ancient Rome. Congratulations. Now it's time to reward yourself with some entertainment. After all, what's the point of staying alive if you can't enjoy the spectacles that make Rome famous? Just be warned. Roman entertainment makes modern extreme sports look like a gentle game of checkers at a retirement home. Let's start with everyone's favourite, the gladiatorial games. Forget the sanitized Hollywood version, where muscular men in shiny armor engage in choreographed combat with minimal bloodshed. The reality is far more brutal. The Colosseum, or other amphitheaters throughout the empire, is where you'll witness human beings fighting to the death for your amusement. Some are condemned criminals, others are slaves, and some are free men who've chosen this dangerous profession for the slim chance of fame and fortune. The day begins with the warm-up acts, condemned criminals being executed in creative and horrifying ways. They might be forced to fight wild animals with no weapons, burned alive, crucified, or made to kill each other. It's a grotesque appetizer before the main event, designed to satisfy the crowd's bloodlust and serve as a public reminder of what happens to those who defy Roman law. Next come the animal hunts, or venaciones. Exotic beasts from across the empire, lions, tigers, bears, elephants, rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, are brought into the arena to be slaughtered by specialized hunters. These aren't conservation-minded exhibitions, where the animals are treated with respect. They're systematic slaughters that have driven some species to extinction in their native regions. Thousands of animals might be killed in a single day of games, sponsored by a particularly ambitious emperor or politician. Finally, the main event, the gladiators. These fighters are trained professionals who specialize in different fighting styles and weapons. There's the Mamaeo with his fish-crested helmet and rectangular shield, the Retiarius with his net and trident, the Thraex with his curved sword, and many more. Each bout is carefully matched to create an interesting contest, not a quick slaughter. Contrary to popular belief, most fights don't end in death. Trained gladiators are valuable investments for their owners, and killing them needlessly is bad business. But deaths do occur, and when a defeated gladiator's life hangs in the balance, it's the crowd and the game's sponsor who decide his fate with a simple gesture, thumbs up or thumbs down. The noise in the amphitheatre is deafening. 50,000 spectators shouting, betting, cheering, and jeering. The smell is a nauseating mixture of blood, sweat, urine, and the garlic breath of your fellow spectators. There's no shade for most attendees, so you're baking in the Mediterranean sun while watching people hack each other to pieces. Vendors weave through the crowd selling snacks, drinks, and souvenirs, creating a festival atmosphere that feels jarringly at odds with the life and death struggles happening below. Not into blood sports? Perhaps the chariot races at the Circus Maximus are more your speed. Here, teams of horses pull lightweight chariots around a track at breakneck speeds, with drivers who are the sports celebrities of their day. The track can accommodate 12 chariots at once, racing 7 laps around a central barrier called the spina. Crashes are common and often fatal, with drivers tying the reins around their waists, a practice that means if they're thrown from the chariot, they'll be dragged behind their panicked horses until someone can stop the team or until there's nothing left to drag. The Circus Maximus can hold up to 250,000 spectators, making it the largest sports venue in history. The crowd is divided by team loyalties, the reds, blues, greens and whites, and riots between rival fans are so common that they've occasionally escalated into citywide violence resulting in thousands of deaths. Betting is rampant, with fortunes won and lost on a single race. The noise is even more overwhelming than at the gladiatorial games, and the dust kicked up by the chariots creates a haze that leaves everyone coated in a fine layer of grime by day's end. For something less violent, but no less bizarre, you might attend the theatre. Roman plays range from adaptations of Greek tragedies to ribald comedies filled with sexual innuendo and toilet humour that would make a modern teenager blush. Actors wear exaggerated masks to help the audience identify characters and project their voices in open-air theatres. All roles, including female ones, are played by men, adding another layer of comedy to already bawdy performances. The audience at Roman theatres makes modern hecklers look positively restrained. They shout, throw food, and make their displeasure known if a performance isn't to their liking. Plays compete with other forms of entertainment, so playwrights often include spectacular effects, music, and dance to keep the audience engaged. It's less appreciating the arts and more entertain me now or I'll pelt you with rotten vegetables. If you're looking for a more refined experience, you might attend a recitation, a public reading of poetry or prose by its author or a professional reader. These are popular among the educated elite, though they can sometimes devolve into tedious affairs where ambitious poets trap their friends and patrons for hours of self-indulgent verse. Pliny the Younger complained about having to sit through 3 days of recitations during one particularly grueling literary festival. For physical recreation, head to the baths, enormous complexes that serve as the Roman equivalent of modern community centres. Here you can exercise in the palaestra, sweat in the caldarium, hot room, cool off in the frigidarium, cold room, and socialise with your fellow citizens. The baths are one of the few places where people of different social classes might mingle, though the wealthiest citizens often bring slaves to guard their clothes and valuables while they bathe. The gaming tables are another popular pastime, with dice games, board games like Ludus Latrunculorum, similar to chess, and betting on everything from chariot races to which fly will take off from a table first. Gambling is technically illegal, except during the Saturnalia festival, but this law is about as strictly enforced as modern speed limits on an empty highway. For the truly wealthy, dinner parties are elaborate entertainment events featuring exotic foods, professional performers, and sometimes intellectual discussions that last well into the night. These aren't just meals, they're status displays where hosts try to outdo each other with rare delicacies, expensive wines, and novel entertainments. So whether you're watching men fight to the death, cheering for your favourite chariot team, cringing through a bawdy comedy, or relaxing at the baths, entertainment in ancient Rome is an assault on the senses, loud, smelly, crowded, and often shockingly violent by modern standards. But hey, at least it takes your mind off the fact that you're living in a world where a small cut could kill you, and your drinking water might contain lead. Speaking of which, let's talk about what you're drinking and how you're staying hydrated in the Mediterranean heat. Staying hydrated in ancient Rome is a challenge that would make a modern survivalist question their life choices. Let's start with the obvious. Don't drink the water. at least not without some serious consideration of the consequences. Rome is famous for its aqueducts, those magnificent arched structures that bring fresh water from distant springs and lakes into the heart of the city. It's an engineering marvel that delivers millions of gallons of water daily to public fountains, baths, and the homes of the wealthy. The Romans are justifiably proud of this system, and in theory it should provide clean, fresh water to the populace. In practice? Well, let's just say that lead pipes weren't the best choice for water distribution. That's right, many of Rome's water pipes are made of lead, a material chosen for its malleability and durability. The Romans call it plumbum, which is where we get the word plumbing, a linguistic souvenir of this questionable engineering decision. While the constant flow of water and mineral deposits that form inside the pipes provide some protection against lead poisoning, you're still getting a small dose of neurotoxin with every sip. Some historians even speculate that chronic lead poisoning contributed to the decline of the Roman Empire by affecting the cognitive abilities of the ruling classes. That persistent headache and inability to make rational decisions might not just be the stress of imperial life. Even if the lead doesn't get you, the water itself might not be as clean as it looks. The open channels of the aqueducts collect dust, debris, and the occasional small animal that wasn't quick enough to avoid falling in. Public fountains become breeding grounds for bacteria as people dip their hands, cups, and sometimes their heads into the basins on hot days. So what's a thirsty Roman to do? Drink wine, of course. Wine is the beverage of choice for all Romans, from the highest senator to the lowliest slave. But this isn't the fine Cabernet you might enjoy with a fancy dinner. Roman wine is often thick, syrupy, and needs to be diluted with water to be palatable. The ratio varies depending on the occasion and your personal tolerance. 1 part wine to 3 parts. Water is common for everyday drinking, while equal parts might be used for a special celebration. Drinking undiluted wine is considered barbaric and a sign of problematic drinking habits, though that doesn't stop some Romans from doing it anyway. The wine itself would make a modern sommelier weep. To preserve it, Romans add all manner of substances, seawater, resin, herbs, spices, and even lead compounds to sweeten it. The resulting flavour profile is less notes of blackberry with a hint of oak, and more hints of pine resin with undertones of whatever was floating in the storage amphora. Some wines are aged and prized, but much of what's consumed daily is young, sharp, and would be better used as salad dressing by modern standards. For those who can't afford wine or prefer something with less alcohol, posca is an option. This is vinegar diluted with water and flavoured with herbs, refreshing in a mouth-puckering way, and the acidity helps kill some waterborne pathogens. Soldiers carry it on campaign, and it's a common drink among the lower classes. Beer exists, but is considered a barbarian drink, consumed primarily in the northern provinces, and definitely not fashionable in Rome proper. It's nothing like modern beer, cloudy, sour, and with a much lower alcohol content. If you order a beer in a Roman tavern, you might as well wear a sign declaring yourself a foreigner. Milk is for babies and invalids, not for regular consumption by adults. Without refrigeration, it spoils quickly in the Roman heat, and besides, the Romans consider drinking milk to be somewhat disgusting. Something only uncivilized people like the northern barbarians would do regularly. For the wealthy, exotic fruit juices might be available, sweetened with honey and served cold. If you can afford to have ice brought down from the mountains and stored in underground chambers. This is a luxury few can enjoy, reserved for the elite who can pay for such extravagances. Public drinking establishments called popine or calpone dot the city, serving wine, simple food, and acting as social hubs for the working class. These aren't the charming pubs of modern imagination. They're often dark, smoky establishments with reputations for gambling, prostitution, and violence. The wine served is usually the cheapest available, sometimes watered down even further by unscrupulous proprietors looking to stretch their profits. Water for bathing is another matter entirely. The famous Roman baths use an impressive system of heating, with slaves tending fires that warm water flowing through the hypocaust system beneath the floors and within the walls. The different bathing rooms offer varying temperatures, from the tepidarium, warm, to the caldarium, hot, to the frigidarium, cold. The water in these pools is changed periodically, but not after each user, meaning you're sharing bath water with dozens, perhaps hundreds of other Romans. Try not to think about that too much as you soak. So, as you navigate your day in ancient Rome, you'll likely find yourself mildly dehydrated, slightly buzzed from diluted wine, and wondering if that metallic taste in your mouth is from the lead pipes or just your imagination. Either way, staying hydrated is yet another daily challenge in a world that seems designed to make survival as complicated as possible. And speaking of survival challenges, let's talk about one of the most fundamental, staying safe in a city where danger lurks around every corner. Safety in ancient Rome is a concept as foreign as indoor plumbing or antibiotics. The Eternal City might be the centre of civilization, but it's also a place where danger lurks around every corner, above every doorway, and sometimes right in your own home. Let's start with the most obvious threat: fire. Rome is essentially a massive tinderbox waiting for a spark. The insulae, those multi-storey apartment buildings where most Romans live, are constructed of wood, mud brick, and other highly flammable materials, packed tightly together along narrow streets. Residents use open flames for cooking, heating, and lighting, often on wooden floors or near flammable furnishings. It's less a question of if a fire will start and more a question of when. When a fire does break out, Rome's firefighting capabilities are limited. Emperor Augustus established the Vigiles, a corps of firefighters who patrol the city, but their equipment consists primarily of buckets, blankets, and axes. Their main firefighting technique is creating fire breaks by demolishing buildings in the path of the flames, a method that's about as precise as performing surgery with a battering ram. By the time they arrive and organise their response, entire blocks might already be engulfed. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE, which Nero may or may not have fiddled through, destroyed 3 of the city's 14 districts and severely damaged 7 others. Thousands died, and countless more were left homeless. After this disaster, building codes were improved, requiring stone walls between buildings and wider streets, but enforcement is spotty at best. Even without catastrophic fires, the physical structure of Rome presents daily dangers. Those multi-storey insula are built by contractors looking to maximise profit, not safety. Collapses are common enough that they barely make news unless the death toll is particularly high. Walking near a building during a heavy rain might mean dodging falling roof tiles, crumbling plaster, or even entire balconies that have decided today is the day they'll surrender to gravity. The streets themselves are obstacle courses. There are no streetlights, so after dark, the city becomes a playground for criminals and a death trap for honest citizens. Wealthy Romans travel with slaves carrying torches and often armed guards, while the rest of the population simply tries to get home before sunset or risks navigating the pitch-black streets by memory. Even during daylight hours, the streets aren't much safer. Carts and wagons barrel through narrow alleys with little regard for pedestrians. There are no traffic regulations beyond a few restrictions on when commercial vehicles can enter certain parts of the city, and the concept of a pedestrian right-of-way would be met with uproarious laughter. The drivers of these vehicles are often slaves who will be punished if they're late with their deliveries, so they're not inclined to slow down for someone who might be in their path. Then there's the crime. Rome has no police force in the modern sense. The vigiles handle firefighting and some night watchman duties, but they're not investigating thefts or assaults. The urban cohorts maintain general order and can be called upon for major disturbances, but day-to-day crime prevention isn't their priority. For the most part, your safety is your own responsibility. Muggings are so common that many Romans carry only what they need for the day, leaving valuables hidden at home. Pickpockets work the crowded markets and public gatherings, often in organized gangs that can strip a victim of purse, jewelry, and even clothing in seconds. Home invasions occur regularly, especially in wealthier neighborhoods where the potential payoff is higher. For women, the dangers are multiplied. Sexual assault is common and rarely prosecuted unless the victim is from a powerful family. Women of status rarely travel without male escorts, not just as a social custom, but as a necessary safety measure. Lower-class women who must work outside the home face daily harassment and danger as they navigate the city. Even the wealthy aren't immune to violence. Political rivalries often turn bloody, with hired thugs attacking opponents in the streets. During periods of political instability, assassinations become almost commonplace. The famous Roman statesman Cicero wasn't just voted out of office. His head and hands were cut off and displayed in the forum as a warning to others who might oppose the powerful. Natural disasters add another layer of danger. The Tiber River floods regularly, drowning those who can't escape the rising waters and leaving disease-breeding mud in its wake. Earthquakes shake the city periodically, bringing down already unstable buildings. And then there are the plagues, mysterious illnesses that sweep through the densely populated city, killing thousands before disappearing as suddenly as they arrived. Even the food and water can kill you. Without refrigeration or modern food safety knowledge, contamination is common. Food poisoning is so frequent, it's not even considered an illness, just an unfortunate fact of life. The lead in the water pipes slowly poisons everyone, though no one will make that connection for another 1,800 years or so. Medical emergencies that would be routine in a modern hospital are often death sentences. A broken leg might never heal properly, leaving you permanently disabled. Appendicitis is a likely death sentence. Childbirth kills a significant percentage of women. Even a small cut can become infected and lead to sepsis in a world without antibiotics. The legal system offers little protection for the average person. Justice is swift but often arbitrary, especially for the lower classes. Without forensic science, criminal investigations rely heavily on witness testimony and confessions, often extracted through torture. False accusations can lead to execution before you have a chance to mount a proper defense. So, as you navigate your day in ancient Rome, you're constantly on alert, watching for falling debris, dodging carts, clutching your purse, eyeing strangers with suspicion, sniffing food before eating it, and generally treating every moment as the potential death trap that it is. Modern life has its stresses, certainly, but at least you can usually walk down the street without worrying that a building might collapse on you or a gang of thieves might drag you into an alley. In Rome, survival isn't just about avoiding major disasters. It's about making it through each ordinary day intact. Religion in ancient Rome isn't just a Sunday morning affair. It's woven into every aspect of daily life. A complex tapestry of gods, spirits, rituals, and superstitions that would make your modern brain spin faster than a chariot wheel. Forget the neat, organized religions of today. Roman religion is a chaotic potluck where everyone brings their favorite deity to the party and no one checks for duplicates. The traditional Roman pantheon features a dizzying array of gods and goddesses, many borrowed from the Greeks but given Latin names and slightly different job descriptions. Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, Venus, Mercury. These major deities oversee the big stuff like war, love, and the seas. But what makes Roman religion truly overwhelming is the sheer number of minor deities responsible for every conceivable aspect of life. Need to open a door? There's a god for that. Janus, the two-faced deity of doorways and transitions. Planting crops. Better make offerings to at least a dozen agricultural deities, each responsible for a different part of the process. Having a baby. The goddess Lucina oversees childbirth, but don't forget Vagitanus, who manages the baby's first cry, or Cunina, who watches over the cradle. There's even Sterculius, the god of manure. Yes, Romans had a deity dedicated specifically to fertilizer, which tells you something about their practical approach to divine intervention. Your home is absolutely crawling with spirits. The Lares protect the household, while the Penates guard the pantry. The genius of the paterfamilias, male head of household, represents his life force and reproductive power. Every crossroads has its guardian spirits, every river its deity, every forest its nymphs. You can't take a step in Rome without tripping over something sacred. Daily life involves constant religious observances. Before breakfast, you make offerings to the household gods, perhaps a bit of food, a splash of wine, or a pinch of incense. Before major undertakings, you check the auspices, signs from the gods, often interpreted through the flight patterns of birds or the entrails of sacrificed animals. Yes, there are professional diviners who spend their careers examining sheep livers and chicken hearts, looking for divine messages in the arrangement of organs. It's like reading tea leaves, but considerably messier. The calendar is packed with religious festivals, so many that they occupy more than half the days of the year. Some are solemn affairs with processions and sacrifices, while others are raucous celebrations that would make modern Mardi Gras look like a church picnic. Saturnalia, the December festival honouring Saturn, involves role reversals, where slaves are served by masters, excessive drinking, gift-giving, and general debauchery. Lupercalia, in February, features young men running through the streets wearing nothing but loincloths made from freshly sacrificed goats, striking women with strips of goat hide to promote fertility. Try explaining that one to your HR department. Public religion is a state affair, overseen by various colleges of priests who are often politicians serving in religious roles rather than spiritual leaders in the modern sense. The Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, is a political appointment of immense importance. Julius Caesar considered it worth going deeply into debt to secure this position. Religious ceremonies accompany every public event, from Senate meetings to military campaigns, and no general would dream of going to battle without favourable omens. Sacrifices are the main form of worship, ranging from simple offerings of grain, wine, or incense to elaborate animal sacrifices for major occasions. The animals, usually cattle, sheep, or pigs, must be perfect specimens, and the ritual must be performed flawlessly. If someone stumbles over a word in the prayer or the animal resists being led to the altar, the whole thing has to be done again. It's religious perfectionism with very high stakes. Foreign cults are constantly being imported into Rome as the empire expands. Isis from Egypt, Mithras from Persia, Cybele from Anatolia. These exotic deities offer mystery initiations and emotional religious experiences that the traditional Roman religion, with its emphasis on correct ritual rather than personal faith, doesn't provide. Some of these cults become wildly popular, especially among certain groups. Mithraism, with its all-male membership and emphasis on courage and brotherhood, is particularly beloved by soldiers. And then there's this new cult from Judea, centered around a crucified teacher named Christus. It's still small during most of the imperial period, often persecuted and considered strange for its exclusivity. These Christians insist their God is the only real one, which Romans find both bizarre and somewhat rude. The Roman approach to religious differences is generally to add new gods to the pantheon, not to reject everyone else's deities. Superstition permeates daily life. You wear amulets to ward off the evil eye. You avoid certain activities on particular days. You're constantly watching for omens, a flight of birds from left to right, a black cat crossing your path, a sneeze at a crucial moment. Some Romans wear bullae, hollow pendants filled with protective charms from infancy. Women might wear amber beads believed to guard against illness. Even the most educated Romans, who might privately express skepticism about certain religious practices, still participate in the rituals. It's both a civic duty and an insurance policy. Better to perform the ceremonies, just in case the gods are watching. The philosopher Seneca summed it up. The wise man will observe religious rituals as if they were commanded by law, not by the gods. So as you navigate your day in ancient Rome, you're not just dealing with physical dangers and social complexities, you're also trying to avoid offending any of the countless deities who might take an interest in your affairs. Forgot to pour a libation before dinner? Apollo might give you indigestion. Stepped on a threshold instead of over it? Janus takes note. In a world where divine forces are believed to control everything from the weather to your digestive system, religious observance isn't optional, it's survival. And speaking of survival, let's talk about how you might get around this sprawling, chaotic city without becoming another statistic in Rome's already impressive mortality rates. Transportation in ancient Rome is an adventure that makes your modern commute look like a luxury cruise, even when you're stuck in rush hour traffic with a broken air conditioner. Getting from point A to point B in the Eternal City requires strategy, stamina, and a willingness to arrive at your destination covered in sweat, dust, and possibly worse substances. Let's start with the most common form of transportation, your own 2 feet. Walking is how most Romans get around the city, regardless of social status. The city is densely packed, with narrow streets and alleys connecting the major thoroughfares. There are no sidewalks as you know them, just slightly raised curbs along some streets that offer minimal protection from the wheeled traffic and the rivers of filth that often flow down the centre of the road. Your footwear for this urban hiking expedition? Sandals, if you're lucky enough to afford them. These aren't your cushioned Birkenstocks with arch support and ergonomic footbeds. Roman sandals are simple affairs, flat pieces of leather attached to your feet with straps, offering all the protection and comfort of a paper towel between you and the cobblestones. The wealthy might have fancier versions with thicker soles or decorative elements, but even the best Roman footwear would make a modern podiatrist weep. If you're a person of means or importance, you might travel by litter, a chair or small couch mounted on poles and carried by slaves. It's the Roman equivalent of a luxury car, complete with curtains for privacy and cushions for comfort. The downside? You're entirely dependent on the strength and coordination of your human bearers, who might stumble on the uneven streets or struggle to navigate through crowded areas. Plus, there's the moral discomfort of being physically carried by other human beings, though Romans of the upper classes seem remarkably unbothered by this arrangement. Wheeled transportation exists, but is severely restricted within the city limits. Julius Caesar banned most wheeled traffic during daylight hours to reduce congestion and noise, with exceptions for construction vehicles, ceremonial processions, and vestal virgins, who apparently had ancient Rome's version of diplomatic immunity when it came to traffic laws. This means most commercial deliveries happen at night, adding to the cacophony that makes sleeping in Rome an exercise in selective hearing. The vehicles themselves are primitive by modern standards. Two-wheeled carts drawn by a single animal are common for lighter loads, while four-wheeled wagons handle heavier cargo. Suspension systems are basically non-existent. Some wagons have a bit of give in the bed, but it's nothing that would qualify as shock absorption. Riding in one of these contraptions on Rome's uneven streets is like being inside a barrel rolling down a rocky hill, but with more dignity, marginally. For the very wealthy, the carpentum is available, a covered two-wheeled carriage that offers some protection from the elements and curious eyes. It's the Roman equivalent of a luxury SUV, complete with decorative carvings and plush interiors. Originally reserved for religious processions and women of high status, by the imperial period it becomes a status symbol for anyone who can afford it. Long-distance travel is an entirely different nightmare. The Romans are famous for their roads, and justifiably so. The network of highways connecting the empire is an engineering marvel, with carefully laid stone surfaces, drainage systems, and bridges that have outlasted the civilization that built them. But don't let this fool you into thinking Roman travel is comfortable. The primary long-distance vehicle is the reader, a four-wheeled carriage that can carry several passengers and luggage. For faster travel, the Cesium is available, a light two-wheeled cart designed for speed rather than comfort. Both are bone-jarringly uncomfortable over long distances. The Romans have no concept of air suspension or even decent springs. The wealthy bring cushions, but there's only so much a pillow can do when you're bouncing over stone roads at the breakneck speed of about 5 miles per hour. For official government business, there's the cursus publicus, the imperial post system established by Augustus. This network of relay stations allows official messengers to travel quickly, changing horses at designated points rather than waiting for their mounts to rest. It's efficient by ancient standards, with messengers potentially covering 50 to 60 miles per day, but it's strictly for government use. No booking a spot on the imperial mail coach for your weekend getaway to Baiae. Speaking of horses, personal horseback riding is uncommon within the city. Horses are expensive to maintain, require stabling, and aren't particularly practical in Rome's crowded streets. They're primarily used by the military, messengers, and the very wealthy, and even then, mostly for travel outside the city. Water transportation is crucial in a city built on a river. The Tiber serves as a major commercial artery, with barges bringing goods directly into the heart of Rome. If you need to cross the river, bridges connect the two banks at several points, though during floods or high water, these can become impassable or even collapse if poorly maintained. For sea travel, Rome's port at Ostia handles ships from across the Mediterranean. These vessels range from small coastal craft to massive grain ships that supply the city with Egyptian wheat. Passenger accommodations on these ships make modern economy class look luxurious. You might get a small space on deck, hope it doesn't rain, or a cramped area below with dozens of other travellers, the smell of the bilge, and possibly rats for company. Travel times by sea vary wildly, depending on winds and weather. The Mediterranean is generally calm in summer, but can be treacherous in winter. So treacherous that shipping largely shuts down from November to March. A journey from Rome to Alexandria might take as little as 2 weeks with favourable winds, or as long as 2 months if the weather is against you. The logistics of travel are complicated by the lack of modern conveniences. There are no online bookings, no GPS, no real maps as you know them. You rely on local knowledge, word of mouth, and perhaps written itineraries that give basic distances between towns. Inns exist along major routes, but their quality varies enormously. From relatively clean establishments with private rooms to flea-infested hovels where you sleep on a bench in a common room, clutching your valuables while keeping one eye open. So whether you're walking across Rome with your toga hiked up to avoid the filth in the streets, bouncing along in a cart that seems designed to rearrange your internal organs, or sailing across the Mediterranean at the mercy of winds and pirates, transportation in ancient Rome is yet another aspect of daily life that makes survival to old age seem like a minor miracle. And speaking of miracles, let's talk about how Romans handle one of life's few certainties: death. Death in ancient Rome is a complex affair, filled with ritual, superstition, and social obligation that makes modern funeral practices look positively streamlined. The Romans have an uncomfortable familiarity with death. It's everywhere, from the gladiatorial arena to the frequent public executions, from the high infant mortality rate to the plagues that periodically sweep through the crowded city. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, this proximity to mortality, Romans approach death with elaborate ceremony. When a Roman citizen is on their deathbed, family members gather around, hoping to be present for the final moments. The closest relative traditionally catches the last breath with a kiss, then closes the eyes of the deceased. This isn't just sentiment. There's a belief that the soul leaves with the final exhalation, and capturing it somehow eases the transition to the afterlife. Immediately after death, the ritual crying begins. This isn't necessarily spontaneous grief, though that may be present too. Professional mourners are often hired to ensure the deceased receives an appropriately noisy send-off. These women, and they are almost always women, are skilled in the art of dramatic lamentation, tearing their hair, scratching their cheeks, and wailing with an enthusiasm that would put the most melodramatic soap opera to shame. The body is prepared by washing, anointing with oils, and dressing in the finest clothing the family can afford. For a man of status, this means his toga. For a woman, her stola. A coin is placed in the mouth to pay Charon, the ferryman who will transport the soul across the River Styx to the underworld. It's the original, you can't take it with you, but you'd better bring exact change. The deceased is then displayed in the atrium of the home, feet pointing toward the door, symbolizing the journey they're about to take, for a period of mourning that lasts from 1 to 7 days, depending on the family's status and resources. During this time, cypress branches might be placed outside the house as a warning to those who should avoid contact with death, particularly priests and others involved in religious duties that require ritual purity. For the average Roman, the funeral procession is a modest affair. Family members carrying the bier to the burial ground outside the city walls. Burial within the city is prohibited for public health reasons, one of Rome's more sensible regulations. But for the wealthy and powerful, a funeral becomes public theatre. Elite funerals process through the forum, where the deceased's male relatives deliver eulogies extolling not just the virtues of the recently departed, but the accomplishments of the entire family line. Actors wearing ancestor masks, imagines, might be hired to represent the illustrious dead of previous generations, creating a parade of family history that serves as both memorial and political advertisement for the surviving relatives. The actual disposal of the body varies by period and family tradition. Early Romans practiced inhumation, burial, but by the late Republic and early Empire, cremation becomes more common. The funeral pyre is a carefully constructed stack of wood. with the body placed on top, along with offerings and personal possessions. The closest male relative lights the pyre with a torch, turning his face away as he does so. Looking at the moment of ignition is considered unlucky. Cremation is a public spectacle, often taking place in designated areas outside the city. The heat isn't always sufficient to completely reduce the body to ashes, so afterward, attendants might need to break apart partially burned bones. The remains are then collected in an urn, which could be anything from a simple clay container for the poor to an elaborately carved marble or alabaster vessel for the wealthy. These remains are then placed in a tomb or columbarium, a structure with niches for holding funeral urns, rather like a dovecote for the dead. Wealthy families have their own mausoleums along the roads leading out of the city, while the less affluent might purchase space in a communal columbarium. The very poor might end up in mass graves or pits, their passing marked with minimal ceremony, if any. Tombs are considered sacred spaces, protected by law and religious taboo. They often feature inscriptions giving the name, age, and accomplishments of the deceased, sometimes with touching personal messages or warnings to potential vandals. Many request that passers-by stop and say the name of the dead person aloud, a form of remembrance that keeps their memory alive in the world. After the funeral comes a period of mourning, with specific customs depending on the relationship to the deceased. Widows are expected to mourn for 10 months, conveniently, the length of time needed to determine if they're pregnant with an heir. Wearing dark clothing and avoiding remarriage during this period. Other family members have shorter prescribed mourning periods, though genuine grief obviously doesn't follow a schedule. 9 days after the funeral, the family holds a feast called the Cena Novendialis, marking the end of the immediate mourning period. Food and drink offerings are left at the tomb, a practice that continues on birthdays, anniversaries, and during the festival of Parentalia in February, when families visit ancestral tombs with gifts of food, wine, and flowers. The Roman concept of the afterlife is somewhat ambiguous. There's a general belief in some form of continued existence, with the virtuous enjoying pleasant fields in the underworld, while the wicked face punishment, but it lacks the detailed cosmology of some other religions. Many epitaphs express skepticism, with phrases like, "I was not," "I was," "I am not," "I care not," suggesting a materialist view that death is simply the end. For those who can't afford elaborate tombs or funeral ceremonies, there are burial clubs, collegia funeraticia, a form of ancient funeral insurance. Members pay regular dues that guarantee them a decent burial, ensuring they won't suffer the ultimate indignity of ending up in a pauper's grave, or, worse, having their body simply dumped in the Tiber. So death in ancient Rome, like everything else, is governed by social status, ritual obligation, and public performance. It's a final opportunity to demonstrate your place in society, or at least to pretend to a status in death that might have eluded you in life. And as with so many aspects of Roman culture, it's a reminder that while the specific practices may be alien to modern sensibilities, the human desires to be remembered, to mark the passing of loved ones, and to face mortality with some measure of dignity remain remarkably constant across the millennia. Education in ancient Rome is nothing like the standardized system you're familiar with today. There are no public schools, no mandatory attendance laws, no standardized testing, though perhaps that's one improvement over the modern system. Education is a private affair, determined entirely by your social status, gender, and your family's willingness to invest in your intellectual development. For the children of slaves and the urban poor, formal education simply doesn't exist. They learn by watching and doing, picking up the skills of their parents' trades through daily observation and gradually increasing participation. A blacksmith's son learns to work metal by spending years in his father's shop, starting with simple tasks like pumping the bellows and gradually advancing to more complex skills. A farmer's daughter learns to spin, weave, and manage household tasks by working alongside her mother from the time she can walk. It's apprenticeship in its most basic form, with no curriculum beyond the practical knowledge needed for survival. For families with slightly more resources, shopkeepers, skilled artisans, minor officials, elementary education might be available. Boys, and only boys with rare exceptions, might attend a ludus, a primary school run by a literator, a teacher of basic literacy. These schools are often little more than a corner of the forum or a small room with minimal furnishings. The teacher might be a former slave with some education, or a free citizen who's found no better way to make a living. The teaching methods would make modern educators recoil in horror. Rote memorization is the foundation of all learning, with physical punishment the standard response to errors or inattention. Students learn to read by chanting the alphabet forward and backward, then progressing to syllables, words, and finally simple texts. Writing begins with tracing letters in wax tablets, using a stylus that has a pointed end for writing and a flat end for erasing. Paper, or rather papyrus, is far too expensive for practice. Mathematics is equally practical and limited. Basic arithmetic using Roman numerals, which makes calculations about as straightforward as solving a puzzle while wearing oven mitts. Try multiplying 1964 by 42 without converting to Arabic numerals, and you'll appreciate the mathematical handicap Roman children operated under. For wealthy families, education looks quite different. Boys might begin with a private tutor, often a Greek slave or freedman who teaches in the home. Around age 12, they progress to the school of a grammaticus, who teaches literature, history, and the art of language. The curriculum centres on Homer, Virgil, and other classical authors, with students expected to memorise vast passages and analyse the rhetorical techniques employed. The final stage for elite young men is studying with a rhetor, a teacher of public speaking. This isn't just about projecting your voice or organising a speech. It's a comprehensive education in persuasion, argument, literary analysis, history, law, and philosophy. The ability to speak persuasively in public is the single most important skill for a Roman of the upper classes, essential for a political career or success in the law courts. Girls from wealthy families might receive education similar to their brothers in the early years, learning literacy and basic mathematics from the same tutors. However, their formal education typically ends at puberty, when they're expected to focus on preparing for marriage and household management. Some exceptional women continue their studies privately, but they're excluded from the schools of rhetoric and the public careers they prepare boys for. The physical environment of learning is Spartan by modern standards. Students sit on benches or stools with no desks. They write on wax tablets held in their laps. There are no textbooks as we know them. Teachers dictate or read from scrolls, and students take notes or memorize directly. The school day begins at dawn and might continue for 6 hours or more, with no breaks for recess or lunch. Discipline is harsh and physical. The ferula, a flat wooden paddle, and the scutica, a leather whip, are standard teaching tools, applied liberally for infractions ranging from errors in recitation to fidgeting during lessons. The Roman poet Horace referred to one of his teachers as Orbilius of the many blows, suggesting that corporal punishment was memorable enough to feature in literary reminiscences. Higher education, as we understand it, doesn't really exist in a formal sense. There's no university system with degree programs and majors. Instead, young men seeking advanced knowledge in philosophy, medicine, or other specialized fields typically travel to centers of learning like Athens, Alexandria, or Rhodes, where they attach themselves to prominent teachers in their chosen subjects. It's more like an extended internship or apprenticeship than a structured educational program. Libraries exist in Rome, both public and private, but they're reference collections rather than lending libraries. Scrolls are expensive, handwritten items that must be read on site, often with the assistance of a slave who handles the unwieldy rolls of papyrus. The Great Library of Alexandria might contain hundreds of thousands of scrolls, but even the most educated Roman would personally own only a few dozen books at most. The content of education is heavily focused on practical skills and cultural knowledge rather than innovation or critical thinking. Students learn what has worked in the past, memorizing the wisdom of ancestors rather than questioning established ideas. Science as we understand it barely exists. Natural philosophy is largely speculative, with little emphasis on experimentation or empirical evidence. Perhaps most alien to modern sensibilities is the complete integration of education with social status. The idea that education might be a path to social mobility or that talent should be nurtured regardless of birth would seem bizarre to most Romans. Education is designed to prepare you for the life you're born into, not to change your place in the social hierarchy. So whether you're learning to shape metal in your father's forge, memorizing Virgil in the school of a Grammaticus, or studying Stoic philosophy in Athens, your education is determined by your birth and aimed at preparing you for a life very similar to that of your parents. The concept of education as a universal right or a means of self-actualization would have to wait many centuries to emerge. In Rome, as in so many other aspects of life, you dance to the tune your social position plays for you, and most Romans never even question the melody. Weather in ancient Rome is not just a topic of small talk, it's a daily battle for comfort and sometimes survival in a world without climate control. The Mediterranean climate offers distinct seasons, each with its own particular brand of misery for the average Roman citizen. Summer in Rome is a special kind of torment. The heat is oppressive, a thick blanket of humidity that settles over the city from June through August. Temperatures regularly climb above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius, and the lack of air conditioning means there's simply no escape. Your one tunic, sticks to your sweat-soaked body like a second skin. The wool toga, if you're unfortunate enough to need to wear one for official business, becomes an instrument of torture, trapping heat and moisture until you feel like you're being slowly poached. The wealthy have some options for cooling. Villas are designed with summer in mind, featuring high ceilings, thick walls, and interior courtyards with fountains and pools that create slightly cooler microclimates. Some affluent Romans flee the city entirely during the hottest months, retreating to coastal villas where sea breezes offer some relief. The Emperor Tiberius was known to escape to his elaborate villa on the island of Capri, where he could indulge in both cooler temperatures and, if historical accounts are to be believed, activities that would make even modern tabloids blush. For everyone else, cooling options are limited and largely ineffective. You might dampen your clothes slightly, hoping for some evaporative cooling. You might seek shade in the narrow alleys between buildings or under the porticos that line some streets. Public fountains become gathering spots where people splash water on their faces and arms, though bathing fully would be considered inappropriate. The public baths offer temporary relief, but they're also crowded, steamy, and not exactly the refreshing experience you might hope for. Nights bring little respite. Without electric fans or even window screens, you face a difficult choice. Leave windows open to catch any stray breeze, inviting mosquitoes and flies to feast on you as you sleep, or close up and slowly bake in your own personal brick oven. Many Romans sleep on rooftops or in courtyards during summer, hoping to catch cooler night air, though this exposes them to dew, insects, and occasional summer showers. Speaking of rain, when it does come in summer, it's often in the form of sudden, violent thunderstorms that turn the unpaved streets into instant mud pits and send torrents of filthy water cascading down the hills of Rome. The city's drainage system, impressive though it is for ancient engineering, can be overwhelmed by these downpours, leading to flash flooding in low-lying areas. The Tiber River, which cuts through the heart of the city, has been known to rise dramatically after heavy rains, sometimes breaching its banks and flooding riverside neighbourhoods. Winter brings its own unique challenges. Rome's Mediterranean climate means winters are generally mild compared to northern Europe, but temperatures can still drop to freezing, especially at night. Snow is rare but not unheard of, and when it does fall, the city essentially shuts down. There are no snow ploughs, no road salt, just a white blanket that transforms the familiar urban landscape into something alien and treacherous. The real enemy in winter isn't snow, but damp cold that seems to seep into your bones. Roman homes are built to release heat, not trap it, with their stone floors and high ceilings. Heating comes from braziers or small hearth fires, which fill the room with smoke as much as warmth. The smoke escapes through holes in the roof or windows, but so does much of the heat. Carbon monoxide poisoning is a silent winter killer, claiming those who seal their rooms too tightly in search of warmth. The poor suffer most acutely in winter. Fuel is expensive, and many can't afford enough charcoal or wood to keep even a small fire going throughout the night. They pile on whatever clothing and blankets they have, sometimes sleeping huddled together for warmth. Chilblains, frostbite, and respiratory infections are common winter companions. The elderly and very young are particularly vulnerable, with winter mortality rates spiking predictably each year. Spring and fall offer brief periods of relative comfort, though spring brings its own challenges in the form of allergies. With no antihistamines available, those sensitive to pollen simply suffer through weeks of sneezing, itchy eyes, and congestion. Fall, while pleasant temperature-wise, marks the beginning of the sickly season, when malaria and other diseases spread more readily in the cooling but still humid conditions. Weather forecasting is more art than science, relying on observation of natural signs, animal behaviour, and a healthy dose of superstition. Farmers and sailors develop keen eyes for cloud patterns and wind shifts that might signal changing weather, but for most urban dwellers, tomorrow's conditions are a mystery until they arrive. There are no weather apps, no 5-day forecasts, just the hope that tomorrow won't bring a scorching heat wave or a bone-chilling cold snap. Clothing offers limited protection against the elements. The basic Roman tunic and toga aren't designed with weather resistance in mind. In winter, those who can afford it add layers, an undertunic perhaps, or a heavier outer garment called a pennula, a kind of cape or poncho made of thick wool or leather. Some wear a cucullus, a hooded cape that offers some protection for the head and shoulders. The very wealthy might have fur-lined garments imported from the colder provinces, but these are luxury items beyond the reach of ordinary citizens. For rain protection, options are similarly limited. The pennula, if made of felted wool or treated leather, offers some water resistance, but nothing like a modern raincoat. Many Romans simply avoid going out in heavy rain if they can help it, conducting business in the covered portions of the forum, or postponing non-essential travel. When they must venture out, they return home wet, cold, and miserable, with no quick way to dry their sodden clothing. Umbrellas exist but are considered effeminate and used primarily by women of the upper classes. They're not the collapsible convenience of today, but rather fixed parasols designed primarily for sun protection. A proper Roman man is expected to endure the rain with stoic dignity, not hide beneath a contraption associated with feminine delicacy. So whether you're sweltering through a Roman August, shivering through a damp February, or simply trying to predict if tomorrow will bring sunshine or storms, weather in ancient Rome is yet another aspect of daily life that reminds you how thoroughly modern convenience has separated us from the physical realities our ancestors faced every day. The next time you adjust your thermostat or check a weather app, spare a thought for the Romans, who faced each season's challenges with nothing but wool clothing, inadequate shelter, and the cold comfort of knowing that, like all things in life, bad weather too shall pass, only to be replaced by a different kind of meteorological misery. Let's wrap up our journey through ancient Rome with a conclusion that ties together all the delightful misery we've explored. After all, if you've made it this far in our bedtime story of Roman horrors, you deserve a proper ending, unlike most Romans, who rarely got the luxury of narrative closure. So, would you survive a day in ancient Rome? Based on everything we've covered, the answer is a resounding probably not. From the moment you wake up on your bug-infested straw mattress to the second you collapse back onto it, assuming your building hasn't collapsed or caught fire during the day, you're navigating a minefield of dangers that would make a modern risk assessment expert have a nervous breakdown. Your morning begins with questionable hygiene, continues with a breakfast that barely deserves the name, and proceeds through streets that are equal parts open sewer and obstacle course. Your work, whether you're a senator debating policy or a slave working the bellows at a blacksmith shop, is physically demanding and offers none of the protections modern workers take for granted. Your lunch is another sad affair of stale bread and garum, and your afternoon brings new opportunities for disease, injury, or social humiliation. If you're lucky enough to have some leisure time, you might enjoy entertainment that ranges from the merely violent to the spectacularly cruel. Your evening meal, while potentially more substantial than your earlier food, comes with its own risks of food poisoning, choking, or simply offending the wrong person at a dinner party. And when you finally retire for the night, you do so knowing that fire, collapse, or home invasion might interrupt your already uncomfortable sleep at any moment. Throughout it all, you're contending with the weather, sweltering in summer, shivering in winter, while wearing clothing that seems designed to maximize discomfort. You're drinking water that might kill you slowly with lead poisoning or quickly with waterborne disease, or wine that's been cut with substances that would make a modern food safety inspector faint. You're breathing air filled with smoke, human waste, and the miasma of 1 million people living without environmental regulations. Your medical options, should you fall ill from any of these hazards, range from ineffective to actively harmful. Your religious obligations are constant and complex, with the threat of divine retribution hanging over even minor infractions. Your transportation options are limited and uncomfortable. Your education, if you receive any, is based on rote memorization and physical punishment. And when death finally comes, as it does for everyone, though considerably earlier in ancient Rome than in the modern world, your funeral will be a reflection of your social status as much as your personal worth. Yet despite all this, Romans not only survived, but built one of history's most impressive civilizations. They constructed aqueducts that still stand, developed legal principles that underpin modern systems, created art and literature that we still study, and expanded their influence across 3 continents. They did all this while dealing with bedbugs, lead poisoning, and the constant threat of violent death. Perhaps there's a lesson here about human resilience, about our capacity to create meaning and beauty even in the most challenging circumstances. Or perhaps the lesson is simpler. Be grateful for modern plumbing, antibiotics, and food safety regulations. Either way, the next time you find yourself complaining about a minor inconvenience of modern life, a slow internet connection perhaps, or a delayed flight, remember what your daily existence would have been like in ancient Rome, and suddenly the present doesn't seem so bad after all. So as you drift off to sleep tonight in your comfortable bed, with clean sheets, temperature control, and a distinct lack of parasites, take a moment to appreciate how far we've come. The Romans gave us roads, concrete, and the calendar, but they also gave us a vivid reminder of how good we have it now. Sweet dreams, and try not to think about that communal sponge on a stick. Some images once conjured are hard to banish from the mind, even across the span of 2,000 years.